Here is the mafia boss whose lifestyle even shocked Elon Musk. Musk, who has seen giant yachts worth $400 million, lunar bunkers, and gigantic tech palaces, had no idea that a cartel leader could surpass him in wealth, secrecy, and precision. But this mobster didn't just live rich, he lived untouchable. Helicopter elevator, diamond-encrusted rifle, a cryptographic safe so sophisticated that billionaires asked him for access. And the craziest part is that he is still alive, richer than ever. But before discussing the boss who stunned Elon Musk, we must look at the richest crime lords in modern history, starting with the one who ran a multi-billion-dollar empire like a bloodstained CEO. Griselda Blanco, $2 billion. She was called the Black Widow, and she earned that nickname with blood. Griselda Blanco was not only the most feared woman in cartel history. She wrote the rules, then burned them, then killed anyone who questioned her. By the late 1970s, she built her empire in Miami, turning the city into the American cocaine capital. At her peak, she was responsible for up to 75% of all the coke entering Florida. But she wasn't just trafficking drugs, she was industrializing violence. The hits weren't occasional, they were routine. One day, she ordered the assassination of her ex-husband in front of their children. He was the second husband she killed. The first was shot after a business conflict. The third, same story. Hence her nickname, the Black Widow, because every man who got close to her ended up in a coffin. She organized her smuggling network like a chief executive officer of a company. She was the first to use human mules, attaching cocaine to children and elderly people, and even disguising bricks as pregnant women's bellies. And when law enforcement noticed, she did not flee. She intensified. Blanco is said to have owned more than 200 properties in Florida alone, not for luxury, but to exert leverage. Entire buildings were bought to eliminate witnesses, create dead zones for surveillance, and redirect law enforcement patrols. She had a city equipped with soundproof torture chambers. Another had a trapdoor under the pool leading to an escape tunnel. Her personal style, a brutal chic. She wore custom Chanel to order executions. She carried a pistol with a mother-of-pearl handle engraved with a gold cross. A former associate claimed to hold business meetings under the influence of her own product with a tiger pacing the room beside her. But despite her cruelty, her organization operated with surgical precision. Her cartel reportedly raked in more than $80 million per month at its peak. This brought her net worth to over $2 billion from $2, an amount she never recovered. And yet, despite all her power, she was not untouchable. By the late 1980s, the DEA caught up with her. She fled to California, then to Colombia, then to prison. But even behind bars, she maintained control. Her enemies died unexpectedly. Her lieutenants remained loyal to her. Yet even Griselda Blanco, the woman who killed her lovers and buried her rivals in silence, feared someone, because there was a man who dominated not only Miami, but an entire nation. But to understand how a man transformed his country into a cartel command center, one must meet the trafficker who bought an island and declared himself untouchable. Carlos Leda, $2.7 billion. Carlos Leder was not just a drug trafficker, he was a fanatic with an air fleet, a private army, and an island designed like a James Bond villain's lair. He did not work for the Medellin cartel. He had designed it, built its infrastructure, then militarized it. Born in Colombia to a German father, Leder combined the cruelty of the cartels with Nazi obsession. He called cocaine a revolutionary product and quoted Adolf Hitler during business meetings, not out of madness, but because he wanted his empire to feel untouchable. And later, it all started with geography. He didn't hide a lab in the jungle like most traffickers. He bought an island, Norman's Cay, a secluded sandy spot in the Bahamas, became his cocaine kingdom. He bribed Bahamian officials with Rolex watches and briefcases full of money. He built a private airstrip to accommodate cargo planes. Anyone who got too close to the island was met by guards armed with M16 rifles and attack dogs. Fishermen disappeared. Journalists were warned. Satellite images showed armed patrols surrounding a luxurious complex discreetly transformed into a trafficking stronghold. At its peak, Leda was transporting more than 300 kilos of cocaine per day, every day, directly to the United States. The logistics were impeccable. Small planes took off from Colombia, refueled at Norman's Cay, and landed in Florida in a few hours. When the American authorities realized it, more than $2.7 billion had been laundered through shell companies, real estate, and foreign accounts. But Leder was not only interested in drugs. He was passionate about power. He gave speeches advocating totalitarianism. He tries to launch his own political movement in Colombia, not clandestinely, but live on television. His program legalized cocaine and transformed Colombia into a narco state. For a brief moment, it seemed he might succeed, but paranoia took over. He had underground tunnels dug under Norman's Cay, built an underwater escape route, and had guards spied on by other guards. Then, in the 1980s, he lost his protection. The United States put pressure on the government of the Bahamas. The island of Leyda was attacked. He narrowly escaped, but the walls closed in. Eventually, his own people turned against him. The DEA captured him in Colombia. Extradited to the United States, sentenced to life imprisonment plus 135 years, he was quietly released decades later under witness protection. To this day, no one knows where he is or how much of his fortune survived. But one thing is certain. Leder transformed islands into air bases into pipelines, and pipelines into weapons. And yet, he was not alone. Another trafficker would take the idea of the fortress island even further and turn it into an empire protected by presidents. But to understand the extent of this protection, one must meet the boss who built his own navy and used it to control the Caribbean. Dawood Ibrahim, $6.7 billion. He started as a scammer in the alleys of Mumbai, the kind of kid who handed out bribes and disappeared as soon as things got tough. Today, he is one of the most wanted men in the world. Dawood Ibrahim not only built a criminal empire, he turned it into a phantom state. In the 1970s, he was just a local thug among many others operating in the Indian docks, stealing cars, smuggling gold, and selling fake passports. But even then, people noticed something different. He was neither loud nor unpredictable. He was methodical, calculating, unusually calm. And when his father, a police officer, tried to arrest him, Dawood did not flee. He disappeared, not just from Mumbai, but from India. What followed would forever change global crime. Dawood founded the D Company, a crime syndicate that became the essential intermediary for everything illegal in Asia. Drugs, weapons, diamonds, counterfeits, human trafficking, and much more. In a few years, he transformed his street trafficking into a $6.7 billion network operating in Dubai, Karachi, Southeast Asia, East Africa, and London. But Dawood was not just a gangster. He became a major political player. He financed Bollywood films, then extorted the actors he paid. He laundered money through five-star hotels while organizing meetings with Pakistani intelligence services. He allegedly provided shelters to terrorist groups, ran shell companies through real estate in Dubai, and transferred money through fake casinos in Macau. His fingerprints are scattered across some of the largest attacks in South Asia, notably the Bombay bombings in 1993, which killed more than 250 people. Despite a worldwide manhunt, Interpol red notices, and joint surveillance by the CIA and MI6, he has never been arrested. Because he does not need to hide, he lives openly. In Karachi, he is said to reside in a highly guarded complex near a military airbase, reportedly protected by elements of the Pakistani intelligence services. A ghost under state cover. And unlike most mafia bosses, Dawood does not crave luxury, does not need a viral mention or gold-plated weapons. He is more dangerous than that, as he operates silently behind banks, politics, borders. In Dubai, his assets reportedly include luxury towers, shopping centers, and massive construction companies that serve as financial laundries. In East Africa, his drug networks pass through unstable governments where a few $1 million can buy police silence for years. And in London, investigators have long believed that his influence extends to finance and cryptocurrencies. It is organized crime, built like a multinational, decentralized, agile, and indifferent to public relations. But despite all this money, despite all this state protection, Ibrahim has never been in the spotlight. Because for him, power is not about fame, but survival. The United States Treasury has labeled him a global terrorist. The Indian government has issued extradition requests for decades. He is accused of uranium trafficking, cricket match fixing, and organizing cross-border kidnappings. And yet, no arrest, no photo, no confirmed location. His network operates like a parallel government, and when the real ones fail, he fills the void. But while Dawood built his empire behind borders and bank accounts, the next mafia boss made so much money and moved so freely that he didn't want to influence governments. He wanted to buy one, because here is the baron who proposed a cash deal for political power and almost succeeded. Semyon Mogilevich, $10 billion. He does not carry a weapon, he does not flee from the police, and he has never spent more than a few nights behind bars. But make no mistake, Semyon Mogilevich is the closest thing the real world has to a James Bond villain. Nicknamed the Brainy Don, Mogilevich does not run his empire with street soldiers or police vehicles. He uses hedge funds, pipelines, fake passports, shell companies, and an address book full of corrupt politicians. The FBI calls him the most dangerous mobster in the world, and for good reason. His empire spans more than 20 countries and involves everything from arms to human trafficking, including oil theft, counterfeit cosmetics, and even stock fraud on the New York Stock Exchange. And he runs everything from Moscow hotel suites. While most mafia bosses live in hiding, Mogilevich prefers five-star lounges and smoking rooms under the full protection of the Russian state. He has been photographed at state dinners. He has held meetings just a few kilometers from the Kremlin offices. Some say he is the bridge between organized crime and the Russian secret services, because unlike more ostentatious godfathers, Mogilevich has two weapons that most criminals do not master: patience and paperwork. He uses shell companies in Cyprus to launder money. He uses Israeli passports to move around without being detected. He even manipulated entire energy markets through shell companies that no regulator could trace. In the 1990s, he led one of the largest stock frauds in American history, swindling investors through a company called Yugoslavia M. Magnex. Millions flowed in. The product? Magnets. The reality? A fake shell for international laundering. When the FBI raided his offices, Mogilevich had long disappeared. He was indicted in the United States, tracked across Europe, and blacklisted by international banks. But none of that mattered, because he never left Russia, and Russia never extradited him. Moreover, when Interpol designated him as a priority target, Mogilevich gave an interview on Russian television from his home in Moscow, smiling, calm, and unperturbed, because he knew something the world did not. Power takes precedence over paperwork. With a fortune estimated at $10 billion, Semyon Mogilevich does not just buy politicians, he integrates legal immunity into his businesses. He does not need to shoot his enemies, he lets the lawyers bury them. But even a criminal empire that stretches from Ukraine to New York seems small compared to what followed. For the next man, not only bypassed laws or bribed governments, he built a drug cartel so massive that he believed it deserved its own nation, and he almost got it. Al Capone, $1.3 billion. Indexed to inflation before the cartels, before the Colombian air bridges and the jungle runways, there was Al Capone. He needed neither planes, nor satellites, nor offshore accounts. He just needed prohibition and Chicago. At the height of his empire in the 1920s, Capone was raking in $100 million a year, equivalent to $1.3 billion today, by turning Americans' thirst for alcohol into an underground gold mine. But Capone was not just a gangster, he was the true celebrity of crime. Every headline bore his name, every flash captured his smile. And yet, behind the silk suits and champagne lounges hid a brutal operator. He owned mayors, he bought judges, he even controlled jurors by placing fake jurors at the round tables before trials began. He managed nightclubs, gambling dens, and illegal distilleries like a business with an internal accounting system coded into the seams of his tailored suits. Every withdrawal of money, every bribe, every hit was recorded, invisible to all but him. His henchmen used machine guns, his accountants used handwritten encryption, and when he needed to make a rival disappear, he didn't shout, he whispered, and it was done. The St. Valentine's Day massacre was his signature. 7 men gunned down in broad daylight, policemen disguised as deliverymen, shell casings littering the garage floor like confetti. No charges, no convictions, just fear and silence. But Capone was not only feared by his enemies, he was idolized by the public. When the government tried to catch him, they found no witnesses. Even the families of the victims remained silent. Why? Because Capone handed out turkeys at Christmas. He funded soup kitchens during the Great Depression. He played the villain and the hero, and America watched him, fascinated. But his downfall was neither bullets nor betrayal. It was tax evasion. The feds couldn't prove murder. They couldn't link him to rackets, but they could trace the undeclared income. In 1931, Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison at Alcatraz. Upon his release, he was only a shadow of his former self, ravaged by untreated syphilis, mumbling in a Florida villa about deals that were no longer possible. But even in death, the Capone brand never disappeared. He was the model, the original, the one who proved that crime not only paid, but made headlines, power and immortality. Yet, despite all his street power and political influence, Capone never touched the global drug money. He never had foreign connections, clandestine laboratories, or offshore money laundering networks. The man who succeeded him did, and he not only built a cartel, he turned it into gold. Kunsa, $5 billion. He was called the King of Opium, but that title was only a small part of his legacy. Kunsa not only ran a drug empire, he built a narco-state hidden in the heart of the Burmese jungle, shielded by mountains and protected by a private army larger than the police forces of most countries. At its peak, he controlled 70% of the world's opium supply. His roots extended from the Golden Triangle to Bangkok, Hong Kong, New York, and Los Angeles. Every syringe, every brick of heroin, it all traced back to him. But what set Kunsa apart was not just the volume, it was the infrastructure. He did not operate in the shadows. He ruled like an emperor of the jungle. Concrete bunkers were dug under the temples, airstrips pierced the rice fields. His soldiers wore uniforms, displayed flags, and manned checkpoints. His close entourage traveled in stolen UN vehicles and crossed borders with diplomatic immunity. The United States labeled him a threat to global stability. But even the CIA made deals with him, exchanging intelligence and access for help in fighting communist rebels. Kunsa played both sides. He sold heroin to the West, fought communists for the Americans, and taxed everything that passed through his region. When rival tribes opposed him, he refused to negotiate. He razed entire villages. But Kunsa was not a savage. He was a cold and calculating strategist. He used the profits from heroin to build schools and clinics in poor communities. He granted loans to farmers and demanded in return a loyalty stronger than any contract. In the 1990s, his fortune exceeded $5 billion, but the walls were closing in. Global pressure was intensifying. Satellite tracking was reaching him. His allies turned against him, and in 1996, he made a deal. He surrendered to the Burmese government, not in handcuffs, but in comfort. They allowed him to retire in a mansion in Yangon, untouched, without trial and immune. Why? Because they needed his maps, his routes, and above all, his silence. Kunsa died in 2007, surrounded by wealth and a legacy. No prison, no trial, no downfall, just a warlord who retired on his own terms. But as powerful as he was, as rich, feared, and untouchable as he might have been, his empire was still built on jungle terrain with tribal armies and muddy tracks. The men who succeeded him owned private jets, palaces, and the militia made up of military defectors. Not to traffic drugs, but to guard warehouses filled with money. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, $14 billion. El Chapo did not run a cartel, he ran the cartel. For more than 2 decades, Joaquin Guzman made the Sinaloa cartel the most powerful drug trafficking network in the world, weighing more than $14 billion. He didn't just transport merchandise, he moved nations. Cocaine from Colombia, heroin from Afghanistan, methamphetamine from Mexico. All of this passed through an empire so vast that it reached every continent except Antarctica. His network had its own chemists, submarines, and distribution chains buried within legitimate businesses. It was global capitalism weaponized, but it was these escapes that made him a legend. The first time, he disappeared from a high-security prison inside a laundry cart. The second time, he disappeared into a 1.5-kilometer tunnel dug right under his shower, equipped with ventilation, lighting, and a getaway motorcycle. The authorities were spending $2 million per week to track him down. He was paying double in bribes just to stay one step ahead. But El Chapo was not just a ghost, he was a king. His ranch had a private zoo, his weapons were gold-plated, and his enemies were never seen again. Some say his reception rooms were actually execution chambers disguised as showrooms. Yet, despite all his brutality, El Chapo operated in plain sight. He gave interviews, took selfies, and once even contacted Hollywood agents for a film about himself. In 2016, he was captured one last time and extradited to the United States. He is currently serving a life sentence in a high-security prison in Colorado. His empire, though fractured, still survives, a machine too large to be destroyed immediately. But as terrifying as El Chapo was, he always looked like a criminal. The men who would follow, he wore suits, held government contracts, and shook hands with the president while running a criminal empire so integrated that it took decades to uncover. Rafael Caro Quintero, $650 million. Officially, probably more than $10 billion. Rafael Caro Quintero did not flaunt his wealth. He buried it. As the founder of the Guadalajara cartel, he pioneered long-term drug trafficking. While others flaunted their power, Caro Quintero smuggled tons of marijuana across the American border and quietly funneled the profits into property titles, offshore accounts, and fake companies. By the late 1980s, he was already a crime lord. But when the DEA pursued him for the murder of agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, he did not react. He disappeared. For nearly 30 years, the man most wanted by American federal agents vanished, presumed dead or buried in the heart of the Sinaloa jungle. But his empire continued to grow. While Quintero remained in the shadows, his investments multiplied. He owned real estate in 5 countries, shares in legal businesses, and reportedly influence within the Mexican government. His official fortune is estimated at $650 million. But according to former DEA officials, the real figure could exceed $10 billion, as no one really knows where this money ends up. He was buying time, he was buying silence. And while other cartels engaged in bloody wars, Caro Quintero kept cashing in. In 2013, he was released from prison due to a procedural error and disappeared almost instantly again. It took nearly 10 years to find him in 2022, hiding in the Sierra Madre. But even today, no one knows what remains of his empire. He not only amassed wealth, he designed a system that survived without him. And yet, one trafficker went even further. He not only hid the money, he made it onto the Forbes list. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, $25 billion. He wasn't called the Lord of the Skies for nothing. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was not just trafficking cocaine. He developed the most sophisticated drug air network in history. While other cartels loaded boats and bribed border agents, Amado built a fleet of Boeing 727 airliners transformed into flying vaults, each capable of transporting more than 10 tons of products across international borders in a few hours. He was not smuggling, he was shipping on a large scale. In the mid-1990s, Amado's airlines operated with military-level coordination. He bought air traffic controllers, placed his own men in radar towers, and when he needed authorization to fly over regulated airspace, he paid generals, not just one, but entire groups. His operation was not clandestine. It operated above the system, flying with authorization, while entire governments pretended not to see anything. But the aerial operation was only half the game. Amado's true power lay in how he used his money. While other traffickers were stacking cash in walls and caves, he was a pioneer in high-end money laundering. He ran luxury hotels catering to both politicians and cartel barons. He built skyscrapers in Mexico City, ran large construction companies, and even financed real estate projects in Texas. All of this was legal on paper, all fueled by cocaine. He was a ghost with a business portfolio, a man without interviews, without press photos, and without written traces, just billions of dollars in a growing mess. But Amado knew that it would not last forever. As the DEA and the Mexican Secret Services tightened the noose, he made a move that even stunned those around him. He checked into a private hospital in Mexico under a pseudonym and underwent a complete facial reconstruction. Not a rhinoplasty, but a full facial replacement. He was going to disappear, but the operation killed him. At least, that's what was said, because what followed raised more questions than answers. The doctors who operated on him were found dead, their bodies stuffed into metal barrels, their families silenced, the medical records erased, and the body in the coffin bloated, unrecognizable. Funeral monitored like a presidential event, a closed casket, a quick burial, and no autopsy. Even today, members of the Mexican intelligence services believe that Amado faked his death, paid surgeons, staged the murders, and got away with a new face, a new identity. And $25 billion in offshore accounts, but dead or alive, his empire never collapsed. The system he built was too profitable to disappear. His pilots kept flying, his accountants kept laundering, his lieutenants kept accumulating. The Carrillo Fuentes brand survived him because it was never about a single baron, but about infrastructures. That is what set Amado apart. He didn't just create wealth. He built a logistics network more advanced than FedEx. He turned the sky into a highway, and with each shipment, he corrupted more. Officers, mayors, police chiefs, Air Force colonels, not individuals, but institutions. Even the Mexican government feared touching him, because defeating Amado meant the collapse of its own system. But his legacy not only shaped Mexico, it shaped the world of organized crime. Every modern cartel that uses drones, private jets, or encrypted waves owes a model to Amado. He proved it was possible to operate on a large scale if one had the courage to buy silence at high altitudes. Yet, despite all his influence, all his terror, and all his empire, he was not the supreme leader. For the next man did not just fly over borders, he shattered the world. While Amado turned the sky into a highway, this final boss built an entire reality. A reality where money, murder, and myth were inseparable. He not only bought jets or bribed officials, he crafted a life so outrageous that even Elon Musk once wondered if it was real. And the answer, even Musk was not ready for it. Pablo Escobar, $30 billion. Here is the mafia boss whose lifestyle even shocked Elon Musk. Pablo Escobar not only built a drug empire, he rewrote the very concept of modern power. At 35 years old, he was earning $420 million per week. His cartel controlled more than 80% of the global cocaine market. And the revenues were so astronomical that his accountants wrote off more than $2 billion per year in damages caused by rats. Literal mountains of money rotting in hidden walls, eaten by vermin because they didn't have time to count it, let alone cash it. But these figures were not even the most terrifying. What made Escobar truly dangerous was how he used that money. How he transformed wealth into political influence, brutality into legacy, and fear into absolute authority. He did not hide in the shadows like other mobsters. He displayed his dominance like a sovereign. His personal estate, Hacienda Nápoles, was not just a hideout, it was a kingdom. Nestled in the Colombian countryside, it had its own private zoo populated with hippos, elephants, giraffes, and ostriches. He imported exotic animals from around the world to prove he could. And many of them still roam freely in Colombia today, a living testament to Escobar's resilience. The estate also included a landing strip, a bullfighting arena, and even dinosaur statues. But it was not just a spectacle, it was a fortress. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Watchtowers were camouflaged as decorative elements. Snipers disguised as ranchers watched from the trees. Surveillance networks connected the estate to hideouts in every major city. It was not paranoia, it was strategic infrastructure. Because Escobar was not just a drug trafficker, he was a warlord playing chess with nations. His political influence was so vast that he offered to repay the entire Colombian national debt in exchange for a simple promise: no extradition to the United States. He financed hospitals and football fields in Medellin, he granted scholarships, he built social housing. For many of the poor, he was not a criminal at all. He was a protector, a provider, a mythical figure who offered more than their own government ever did. But behind this generosity lay a threat that defined his entire regime: silver or lead, money or bullet. Accept the bribe or take the bullet. Such was the decision imposed on judges, police chiefs, legislators, and journalists. Thousands of people complied. Many disappeared. Entire branches of the government fell under his control. Even high-ranking presidential advisors whispered his name cautiously. No room was safe, no wire was reliable. Escobar had ears everywhere, and his silence had consequences. He did not bribe to escape the law. He bribed to become the law. Escobar operated on such a scale that Forbes ranked him among the richest men in the world. Not as a criminal, but as a billionaire entrepreneur. His fortune circulated through shell companies, luxury hotels, offshore accounts, and legitimate development projects. And when law enforcement began to close in, Escobar adapted again. He built a private prison, the cathedral fully equipped with pool tables, connections, gardens, a bar, and even a waterfall. It was supposed to be a gesture of cooperation with the government. In reality, it was an additional layer of insulation, a base of operations protected by law. But the illusion could not last forever. Under public pressure from the United States, the Colombian forces tried to transfer him to a real prison. Escobar disappeared. He spent the next 16 months on the run, hunted by military units, rival cartels, CIA-backed intervention groups, and bounty hunters. He constantly moved, using underground tunnels, convoys, and fortified enclosures with multiple exits. And yet, even on the run, his empire continued to produce. The drug routes never stopped, the money never dried up. The fear never disappeared. That's what most people forget. Even hidden in sewer tunnels and dilapidated buildings, Escobar kept control. He did not need to be seen to be obeyed. His orders were transmitted by code, through intermediaries and loyalists who killed without hesitation. For every soldier lost, 10 others would show up. For every hideout discovered, 2 more were built. The system ran on blood, loyalty, and mountains of money. When he was finally cornered and killed in 1993, shot on a rooftop medallion, the war was not over. In fact, some claim it was just beginning. Escobar's death shattered the balance of power, triggering new waves of violence, with rival cartels vying for the legacy of the infrastructure he had left behind. His family was scattered. His fortune, or what remained of it, was buried, lost, or confiscated. But the shadow he cast still looms over Colombia and beyond. Even today, construction teams occasionally discover hidden chests filled with his decaying money. Gold-plated weapons, secret records, and messages to his allies have been found sealed in walls and under floors. And throughout Medellin, murals of Escobar remain, not as warnings, but as tributes. The mythology outlived the man. The legend became folklore. What shocked observers, even those who hold power on a global scale, was not just the cruelty or the money, but the extent of the transformation. Escobar did not build a criminal empire within the world. He reshaped the world around his empire. He manipulated economies, laws, and the will of governments. He didn't just make history, he weaponized it. In a world where billionaires buy media platforms and influence elections, Escobar achieved all of this without claiming to be legitimate. And he did it in a country torn by inequalities, insurgency, and war. He did not exploit the system, he embodied it. And that is why, even decades later, his story still seems unreal. Because Pablo Escobar was not just rich, he was the architect of a criminal civilization, a self-taught ruler with a kingdom of money, cruelty, and charisma. His empire has vanished, his dynasty fractured. But the model he left behind, a power built on fear, loyalty bought at a high price, and laws rewritten with gunfire, still resonates in all the cartels that followed. No one has replicated it, far from it, because no matter how much money one makes, a kingdom like Pablo Escobar's will never be built.